Good everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. So today I'll be talking about Queueable Apex. So in the last episode I talked about Batch Apex, and before Batch Apex I talked about future methods, right? So now I think Queueable Apex is the right topic to talk about now. So what is Queueable Apex, right? Queueable Apex in simple terms is a superset of future methods with some extra stuff, right? So what Salesforce has done, they took the simplicity of the future method and the power of the batch apex and combine together. So that's what exactly the Queueable Apex is all about, right? Um, so Queueable Apex has a lot of advantage. So as you can see from my screen, this is how a Queueable Apex class looks like. My apologies for calling it as a test demo, but I just wanted to give you a context how it looks like and how easy to implement a Queueable Apex compared to the batch Apex, right? Now the Queueable Apex has a lot of advantage, right? If you have looked at the future methods, right, you might be aware about the support of only the primitive types. Now, in case of the Queueable Apex, it does contain the support of non-primitive types. It can contain member variable of non-primitive data types. You can call as subjects of custom Apex types. So you can monitor your Queueable Apex, right? Which is the pretty awesome thing around the Queueable Apex side of things. And you can pretty much submit your job by invoking system dot enqueuable job. That's one of the easiest way you can do that. And and another thing about that, I just wanted to mention about the Queueable Apex, which is pretty handy, which is pretty useful, and I would say that it's one of the best option compared to the feature method. That's the chaining jobs. You can chain one job to another job by starting a second job from a running job, right? So which is a pretty advantage. Chaining jobs is useful if you need to do some, if you wanted to do some kind of sequential processing. Okay, so that's one of the thing. So the but one that being said, right? That being said, future methods can be used, over Qubel when you need uh, you know, the functionality of synchronous and asynchronous together. So the feature methods can be handy there. Um, so I do understand that some companies might say, "Oh, look, we don't want it to use the feature methods. Let's move everything to Queueable Apex," right? That's a good analogy, but that could be a good stand. But that being said, right, like I said, the future method might be useful. If your functionality sometimes requires synchronous or asynchronous stuff, right? So that's one of the stuff. Now look at the code here, right? It's pretty straightforward. When you looked at the batch apex, right? When we talked about the batch apex in the previous episode, I've demonstrated how you need to have a start, execute, and finish methods, right? Because that's what the interface expects you to implement if you are implementing a batch interface, right? But in case of Queueable, it's pretty straightforward. All you need is an execute where you write your logic here, right? And like as you can see, all it needs to do is implement the Queueable, right? So that's one of the advantage of having, and it's pretty easy to test as well. Now, if you wanted to do a say for instance chaining of a job, right? So it's pretty easy to do that. So let's say I take this off. I'll just give you a syntax, right? How to chain a job. Okay, so you write all your logic here, blah blah blah, right? Blah 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 blah, whatever, right? It reminds me of that that Hotel Transylvania movie where Dracula said blah blah blah. Right? Okay. Sorry, I digress. So now, if you wanted to do system dot enqueue job, right? And then you can pass the new second job, whatever you wanted to pass, right? New whatever job, new job. So this is a syntax to chain a job when it comes to the Queueable Apex. So that if you want, because this is very useful if you wanted to process stuff, sequentially, right? So and okay, now feature methods is pretty simple. As I demonstrated, it's not fancy. You can get started straight away. But there are a few things to remember. Okay, um, the execution of the queue jobs counts once against the shared limit for asynchronous Apex methods execution. That's the first thing. You can add up to 50 jobs to the queue with system dot this thing in a single transaction, right? So when you are chaining the jobs, right, you just have to understand one thing. You can add only one job from an executing job with synchronous um, NQ job. Now, you must be confused about what the heck this guy talking about, right? So what I meant by that is that only one child job can exist for each parent Queueable job, right? If you look at the child-parent relationship, okay? Um, so you can't really, do multiple child jobs from the same Queueable job, which is not a good thing to do, right? Now, there is no limit as such, which is enforced on the depth of a chain job. I mean, so that means is that you can chain one job to another job and repeat the process, which that's yeah, that's one of the things you have to keep into consideration. So if you have a lot of batches to execute, then I will not recommend to use the queuable option because it's not a good option to do so. But if you are worrying about just one batch, then batch is not a great choice. You can go with the queuable job, right? If you wanted to process the stuff in a sequential manner, then the queuable option is the better option to go for, right? I mean, there's nothing much to talk about, to be honest, when it comes to the queuable Apex, right? I mean, these are the few things you have to keep into consideration. And as I've demonstrated, the code is pretty straightforward. Whatever logic you want to write it and execute. But that being said, you should not be writing all your business logic inside it. You should have a separate helper class or interface or whatever does the job, right? And then you call within this method. That's the best way to do because always aim for a modular approach. Never do make your code tightly coupled, right? In object-oriented concept, you must be aware about the loosely coupled terminology, right? Where you make use of interfaces to do the stuff, right? So that similar principle, I would highly encourage you to use it here. Make your code modular, right? Do not write a code so they get tightly coupled. Tightly coupled code is ugly and it stinks over the course of time. That's why the concept of code smell, came into picture. Okay, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about, guys. So I hope you guys have an amazing Sunday wherever you are. Adios.